very warm welcome to all our viewers and welcome to our special coverage here and our special edition on Now TV International, covering, of course, the very important COP26 climate talks that are being held in Glasgow in Scotland. And the UN climate talks in Glasgow urged special treatment for Africa within the Paris Agreement, as Africa suffers the most negative repercussions, yet is considered to be a major player in climate action. Of course, the summit is being attended by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. We have more details in this story.
The international community should give Africa special treatment regarding climate action under the Paris Accord, given the economic, security, political and social challenges it faces. The Sisi was speaking Monday at the meetings of the UN Conference of Parties COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland. He said Africa suffers the most negative repercussions, yet is considered to be a major player in climate action. The Paris Agreement, signed by 196 parties in 2015, aims to limit global temperature increase to under 1.5 Celsius degrees and reach net zero emissions by 2050. The focus of the African group of negotiators as they go into the 26th UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties, known as COP26 in Glasgow, is on climate adaptation. That means preparing to meet what is to come rather than trying to avert it. Although it only contributes less than 4% toward global carbon emissions, Africa is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world and is the continent worst impacted by climate change. A recent intergovernmental panel on climate change report says Africa is likely to experience warming of more than 3 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. Rainfall is expected to fail in many places, causing drought. But when it does rain, it will fall with such ferocity that it will lead to widespread flooding and destruction. For a continent where 7 out of 10 people rely on rain-fed agriculture for a living, this spells doom. The evidence of climate change is everywhere in Africa. The desert is creeping south of the Sahel, turning the once lush farmlands into arid zones, and crop failures have become frequent. Extreme weather events that used to happen once a century are now common.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're now delighted to be joined over the telephone by our guest for this afternoon, Dr. Magdi Alef, the international climate expert. Dr. Magdi?
You're welcome, yes.
Thank you very much for joining us, Doctor. Now, how do you see Cairo's participation in the COP26 conference, a very important meeting of world leaders to discuss climate change and the challenges facing our environment?
Unusually, the climate summit, which is the 26th one, is looking for the new trends and problems and maybe the disasters that happened all over the last year and then the coming years. So according to this, so the report prepared by the International Secretariat of the IPCC is already presented the problem of the climate change issue as far as the expectation by the meteorological authorities and also the Organization of Meteorology in London. They issued a report that the temperature, the Earth temperature may exceed 1.5 before the 2035. So this is a problem because we're expecting that 1.5 degrees will be happened up to 2050. So this is actually a bad surprise for the experts that the efforts must be multiplied. This is why the initiatives of the European Union are actually declaring that they will reduce up to 40% of their GHG, the greenhouse gas emission. And this is the only countries give a solid promise and solid commitment to do so. Up till now, for the United States, for the China, and you can see, of course, that China and Russia didn't attend the conference.
Yes.
So they haven't any commitment up till now. The USA President Joe Biden declared that he is committed to all the recommendations that will be concluded by the end of the conference. But the problem actually is what's called the desertification phenomena. The desertification phenomena is not only the sand encroachment or droughts. No. Nowadays, when you are talking about thousands of trees being fired all over the forest, the central forest in the United States, in the North America, Africa, and the North America, and the South America, and Africa, and the Mediterranean Sea, and also Asia. This is a very indicative phenomena that there is a problem will be happening more in the next years. As far we inject more pollution, and we actually destroying more CO2 emissions absorption, because we are looking for the forests and the chlorophyll materials of the main leaflets of the trees as a main factory of absorbing the CO2 and producing oxygen.
Yes.
Unfortunately, according to the billions of trees that being fired or cut or being like the in Brazil that when they remove 1/3 of the total forests of the tropical forests, which is actually the very rich forests of biodiversity, up to more than 2/3 of those forests being removed and fired to be cultivated by traditional crops, which is actually, in our point of view as experts, it's a real disaster for the climate change.
Dr. Magdi,
yes.
Let me ask you, sir, how do you see the prospects of success for any of the planned pledges? For example, one of the pledges is to end deforestation in more than 100 countries around the world. How feasible is this pledge?
We hope this time there will be a seriousness and a real commitment, because we have real sweet words all over the 25 years ago, starting with this agreement for climate change in 1992 with Dr. Mustafa Kemal Tolba, the Egyptian famous expert. And there was several commitments every time that we will do so and so. This year, maybe according to the disasters and the acute and extreme events that happened in the industrial countries, so they may be, because of their negative impacts, they may move this time. They may be honest to implement their words and their actually commitment. So we hope that there will be more funds for climate adaptation and the climate resilience agriculture, climate resilience building, and climate resilience community developments. We hope that they will, as they said, they will promise to have 1%. For the total national gross income of the countries will be allocated for the climate resilience methodologies, either for solar energies or for reducing the GHG by using the green hydrogen, or using the waterfalls, or using the solar panels. So the solar panels is not a cheap price. It's actually very expensive for the rural and the farmers in Africa especially. Africa is responsible for only, including the Arab region and Egypt, only 4% of the emissions of total content of Africa. 4%. So this in front of the total emissions that being produced by the industrialized countries, it will be a real problem. So it's
and lots of reports, for example, the latest report by the World Bank says that 86 million Africans will have to migrate within their own countries by 2050, just as a result of the climate change effects. So obviously the impact of climate change is very much affecting the African continent, regardless of its output towards it.
It's actually Africa, unfortunately, will pay a real cost for the climate change impact, with no responsibility of the African countries. Actually, we are affected, but we didn't did it especially in our Mediterranean coast and in the Delta region, and in even for the Mediterranean Sea and for the Red Sea. We have a lot of problems because of the climate change without any responsibility of the Egyptian government or the Egyptian people for such emissions. We are receiving those emissions, and they are, passing thousands of kilometers from the northern Mediterranean to the southern Mediterranean, and they are carrying the pollutants, either CO2 or the sulfur oxides or nitrous oxides or the methane or the particulates, any kinds of particulates coming from the northern to the southern part of the continent. Actually, it affects negatively our biodiversity, it affects the fauna and the flora of our lands, and it happened that the drought is attacking at least 25% of the total production of the Arab and African agricultural land.
Absolutely. Right. Doctor, we saw the statement by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in his address, and he urged for special treatment for the African continent within the Paris Agreement. How do you see this as coming to light, and what difference would this make for the African continent? As you said, they are paying a very high price for something they've had little to do with so far.
Actually, the President Fattah el-Sisi in all the international events usually talk about Egypt and then Africa.
Yes, he advocates.
This is not the first time to do so, and he is committed to the African continent as far as he, for the first time, to be a president of Egypt, is being elected by the total African countries as the CEO or the president of the African Union. So he's usually committed to give some grants for African countries, delivering of some medicinal and health services, and maybe some of the nutritional stuffs being also delivered to our brothers in the African countries. He is actually supporting all the African demand as far as he can as a president of the ARE. But nowadays, when he is in an international panel like this, of course, he will insist to declare the problems of the African environmental crisis.
Yes,
absolutely. I mean a crisis. It is not actually actions. It's really a real crisis.
Indeed. Dr. Magdi, we've seen lots of steps by Egypt to revert to green energy, to use renewable energy sources, to try and limit its carbon impact as well, all for the restriction of the impacts of climate change. How important are these projects that Egypt has embarked on to find alternative sources of energy and more eco-friendly options?
Actually, we are lucky, of course, that we have new reservoirs of the natural gas, and this is a clean, actually, fuel. So the total amount that we are producing, and in coordination with Greece and Cyprus and other Mediterranean countries, we have the only facility for liquefying the gas, the natural gas, and you can, of course, through new ships, the shipment of tanks, cooled shipments of tanks to transfer the gas to the other countries. So we have more facilities to import those natural gas amount of reservoirs that we have in our northern delta. Of course, Egypt has a common project with the nearby countries in the eastern Mediterranean. In the same kind that we have our hydrological electric power generation through the high dam and the other two sites from the waterfalls. In addition also to the manufacturing the electric cars and encouraging and low price of electric cars in Egypt to encourage the individuals and the companies and all the authorities to transfer from the gasoline and the benzene fuel cars to electric cars.
Yes.
And you can see all over the Desert Road of Cairo Alexandria. In every station, you will see the stand of the electric supply
charging.
for those kinds of cars. And also the other electric-powered transportation, either by the Rapid Express train or the monorail or the other communication and transport projects being done by the Ministry of Transport.
Yes.
All of them are using the electric supply rather than gasoline, which is actually a real shift. This is among the 25% that President Sisi referred that Egypt will have as a first phase a reduction of 25% of the total GHG of Egypt. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank you very, very much, Dr. Magdi Allem, our international climate expert. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us and for your time. And we move to another report where Cairo stressed the utmost importance of Egypt's historical Nile water rights. It described the dispute as an existential issue that requires the international community to make all possible efforts to reach a binding legal agreement on the rules for filling and operating the dam in a way that will preserve Egypt's water security. We have more details in this story.
Cairo and Vienna discussed developments related to the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam during a meeting on the sidelines of the Climate Change Conference of Parties, COP26, in Glasgow. At the meeting with the Chancellor of Austria, Alexander Schallenberg, El-Sisi said Egypt gives great importance to its historical Nile water rights. He described the dispute as an existential issue that requires the international community to make all possible efforts to reach a binding legal agreement on the rules for filling and operating the dam in a way that preserves Egypt's water security. According to El-Sisi, the settlement of the region's crises can be only achieved through stability and restoring the pillars of the national state and its institutions, done by strengthening national armies and central governments to counter extremist groups and organizations. Schallenberg said his country was likewise eager to strengthen bilateral ties, which he called a pivotal pillar of security in the Middle East and Mediterranean region. He said Austria also desires to continue coordinating with Egypt to develop bilateral relations in a way that contributes to achieving their common interests. The meeting reviewed means to advance bilateral relations between the two sides.
And with this, we come to the end of our special edition and our coverage here of the COP26 summit. And of course, we will be bringing you continued updates on the summit throughout the day here on Nile TV International. You were in the company of myself, Angie Meher. Many thanks for watching.